Welcome to the last show on Televida. Ubiquitous. That means all around, always present. Our next guest, I'm so honored, is ubiquitous in Kansas City. He's been on the air since 1988. So theoretically, he actually had people go and deliver their babies to his broadcast and then send those said babies off to college and then have those said babies move back in with him when they couldn't find a job.
Oh.
He could actually do all this. Our guest today is Mr. Joel Nichols. Thank you, Joel.
It's an honor to be here. Ubiquitous. I thought it just meant my suit didn't fit
No,
right.
you are ubiquitous. You're everywhere. Even when I came back from LA, you were on the air, and I've always been so intrigued with you. You actually, and you still don't remember this, but I was doing a charity gig for a Catholic church out in KCK, and they said, the weather guy is going to do a set. And I was like, well, how can this work? And
Yeah, that can't work.
yeah, and you were hilarious, and I've just been intrigued with you. I've been quietly stalking you for a better part of 27 years now. And every time I go to Madison, I try to look your family up. And
That's my college town.
Yes.
But I do want to thank you because I did a lot of interview shows. I never provided fancy water.
That's right. I've got fancy water.
And I never, ever gave anybody excellent barbecue sauce.
There you go.
This is a step
That's
above.
Veterans Community Project sauce, by the way.
It's a step above anything I've ever done.
Every bottle goes to help homeless veterans, actually. So let's start at the beginning, actually. You said your father, we're going to go way back before he came to Kansas City, folks. Your father was actually in radio. Now, did he own the station, or what did he do with the station?
Well, it's funny because that was back when you could actually, with a friend, start a radio station, not an internet radio station, but a brick and mortar radio station. And one of his best friends was a great engineer, had been in the Navy in World War II, and was able to create the tower and the board and everything he needed.
Just in a farmhouse out in Lowell, Wisconsin.
Almost, yeah. And this friend of his already had a recording studio. They did polka music mostly. Polka and old-timey kind of music. And he created a radio station there. And my dad joined him in this venture as sort of the on-air person and salesperson, and he wore all the other hats. So Jim, my dad's friend, was the engineer, and my dad wore all the other hats, and they had this little radio station in our little town of Wisconsin, and it was great.
When I think about that, I remember that movie with George Clooney, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, where they just kind of drive out in the middle of nowhere, and there's a radio station, and
we had people come and sing into the can. Sing into the can. That's what we had to do.
That. So that's where you got your first taste of media.
Yeah, all my brothers, I have 3 older brothers, and all of us worked to one degree or another at this radio station. I was very, very little, so my dad would have me come in and just say things like, "Stay tuned for my daddy on WVLR." That's what I would say. It was my little thing, or whatever. And he paid me in Oreos and in chocolate milk.
Yeah, exactly.
Which I got for
which I could get paid. That's what I get paid here. It's ironically
wow, it's
double stuffed Oreos, whole chocolate milk. Look at this. Water and barbecue sauce.
It all comes full circle. But anyway, so I did little things with him on his show, and then he had a character named Ole Hansen that would play polka music, waltzes and schottisches.
You're serious about that? Well, polka music is huge up in Wisconsin.
Huge.
The whole
and so he did polka music every Saturday for like 3 hours. Ole Hansen would host a polka show, and in his dialect as Ole Hansen, CH words like chair would come out SH, share. So he would say, "Have a seat in that chair." So his mother, my grandma, knowing that CH sounded like SH, would call him on the air and request Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, just to see how's he going to get around this. So Grandma would sit out there and go, "I'm going to request that song."
There you go.
But I did that, and it was neat. It was an old-fashioned radio station.
I love that. It reminds me of John Candy and SCTV, where he had the polka guys. So actually, the
Schmangy Brothers.
The Schmangy Brothers. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
What amazed me is that you came into radio. Nowadays, because you're doing weather forever, you have to be a trained meteorologist. You have your name, and then you have this alphabet on the side of your name, right? Of everything like that. But you're from the school, the Fred Brodsky school.
Absolutely.
The David Letterman school. I don't know, is Willard Scott, was he part of this school?
Yeah, he was part of the school too, absolutely.
Roker's probably got some alphabet behind
Roker might actually be a meteorologist.
Yeah. But you weren't a meteorologist.
No, and when I go to college at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, which you know well.
Yeah.
And then I worked for a state legislator, and that's interesting to me. But they needed part-time help at a cable station, so I went and worked at a cable station, which then led to this chance to do
weather.
Yeah.
No, doing weather.
I didn't do weather at the cable station. I did a little program not unlike this, where we would talk to people. But anyway, the local NBC affiliate said, would you be interested in doing weather? And I said, well, I don't have a degree in meteorology. And in fact, in college, the one course I took that I flunked the 6-week exam and dropped was meteorology. I never, after 6 weeks,
You're actually negative meteorology.
I'm negative. So they said, well, we don't care. You grew up around Wisconsin, in this part of Wisconsin, we think you can do it. So I would go on the air and talk about weather. And then I came here, and when I started here, you had Dan Henry and Fred Brodsky and myself. And we were not.
You're the only one without a bowling show. At this
That's
point.
right.
Okay.
We were broadcasters who happened to do weather as part of our job, as opposed to meteorologists who happen to be broadcasters. And so when Brodsky retired, because Dan Henry retired first, and when Fred retired, he called me and said, "You're the last one standing now. You're the last one left without an AMS seal and all of that stuff to go along with it." And I don't denigrate that at all.
Did they look at you as less because you didn't have it? I mean, would you dare go to a TV weatherman convention without all those alphabets behind your name?
Well, Elliot, I think they looked at me as less for so many other reasons.
That's right.
There's a plethora of reasons that go, nah.
But at the end of the day, I mean, something's going down bad. It's a tornado. It's a storm watch. What can this person with the alphabet behind his name give me that you couldn't, that Brodsky couldn't, that Henry couldn't?
I had experience being in a place. I had an ability, maybe sort of, kind of, to talk with people, converse, be conversational on the air. But I would never denigrate those who did the study and did the hard work and did the science and the math. And I will say that all of them. I worked with Brian Busby for many, many years. And then I
know the alphabet behind his name.
Right, and Gary Lezak as well.
Yeah.
They never were anything less than, respectful and courteous and welcoming to me. And I can't say they ever treated me as less than what they were, other than for the obvious reasons. Nothing to do with the
But let me ask you this, because sometimes they get into the conversation like, let's just say I'm talking with two physicians, right? I can talk and everything like that, and all of a sudden they're going to mention some terminology that's just over my head, right? That I don't know. What was that? Is that the same way it was? You're in a conversation with Busby, and all of a sudden they're talking weather. Then they
fortunately, when it comes to weather, it's all over our head, Elliot. So we're all in the same boat, man. It's all over our head. Thank you very much.
Well, why is it that? Because I'm always intrigued because David Letterman, most famous weatherman. Weather was the only place that allowed the room to do comedy, right? Did they actually let you be funny? They said, Joel, you can be kind of funny here with this?
Well, Letterman, I think, got in trouble when he said there was hail the size of canned hams.
Yeah, exactly.
But when I first started doing weather, our main weatherman up in Wisconsin, Madison, he was a gospel singer. That was really his job. He was not an AMS guy either. He was a gospel singer. And I was this guy on the weekend. And we were not AMS certified. Other stations were. And this was when I was young and I was not a very nice person. And I got there, somebody said in an article in the local Madison paper, one of the other weather people on a different channel, well, over at that channel, those guys aren't even AMS certified. They're not AMS. So I went on the air that weekend and
that's American Meteorological Society.
Yeah. So I created a little I had a picture of a monkey doing weather. And I said, I am AMS certified, American Monkey Society. This is my teacher.
That's hilarious.
So, but it didn't play well. I think the viewers were not hurt by it, but the other weather people on the other channels weren't too crazy about me. But I think that what happened is I was just able. The guy that hired me for Channel 9 really wanted somebody who could.
Patton?
It was Brian Bracco, our news director, and he wanted somebody who could just kind of communicate and then go out and do feature stories and have some fun and could work well with the most amazing.
Because you came in to do the mornings, didn't you?
Right, Maria Antonia and I.
So this was actually kind of a new format. We had the local Today Show that everybody grew up with, but this is the first time they kind of expanded that program locally.
Exactly.
You were on 9, so they didn't have the Today Show.
Well, you had Good Morning America.
Okay.
And this was
the first. You came on before that.
Exactly. And Maria Antonia, who's amazing. She was the anchor, and I was the sidekick.
Help get her on this show, by the way, please.
I will recommend it highly.
I don't know if she knows me or not, but I'd love to have her on this show.
I will say you get stuff.
There you go.
But anyway, we did the show together forever and ever, and we loved doing it with each other, and we were great together, and our kids all kind of grew up together, and it was a wonderful time for us. but we were able to be a little more ourselves because it was the morning, and we could allow some of our personality and other things to come out.
Well, let me ask you this, because how many years were you on the air with Maria?
We must have done First News together for, I don't know, a decade at least.
Like, longer than some marriages, actually.
Probably, yeah.
So is there a certain dynamic that exists with an on-air couple that's similar to the dynamic with your actual wife,
I
Jessica?
think so. I mean, I think that you can...
is there like the silent treatment? I mean, that...
You could have that happen. Maria was always wonderful and professional.
Because I read about this. It happened with Tim Allen,
Sure.
On-air couples, Ray Romano, these other folks. And so you're spending all this time together and everything like that, so it just gets to be the same kind of cadence.
But Maria and I never, ever had a problem because of her, because she was professional and mature and smart.
But the program director who hired you, you guys hadn't done any screen testing before like they would do in a traditional casting situation. You just hoped.
We did one little thing together.
Yeah.
When I came
down
for the interview.
I mean, pretty much it was the fait accompli at that point. Yeah. It had to work out.
But we just got along great, and we did the mornings, and we could have fun. It was a different format than other newscasts where they had to be really on the ball to get to the next story. So we had a little more leeway and a little more free time, and it's different than it is today. Now I think it's much more move to the next story. Let's keep it moving.
And every sense of media. I mean, when I used to do the radio, I didn't have the PD hunched over listening to my tapes. I got a little leeway to do that. What did you know about Kansas City before you got here? I mean, did you have any awareness of it?
I knew that the legislator I had worked for in Madison came to a convention here.
The Republican convention in '76?
No, just a legislators' convention.
Gotcha.
Just a legislators' convention. And
that was
she brought back a brochure about Kansas City. And what we thought was so funny was that at the time, that fountain down at the plaza was called the J.C. Nichols Fountain.
That is.
And she said, "Isn't that funny? J.C. Nichols and you're J.B. Nichols. Isn't that funny?" Yeah. That was our little joke with each other, and that's the only thing I really knew.
That was the kismet for you to come down.
Well, that was about all I knew before I came down. Oh.
Did you? Yeah, because this was you could have changed your name. A lot of artists changed their name and everything like that. Because I always thought, weather guy, I thought you should have called yourself Cheese Thunder.
Oh, that would have
because of the
Cheese
weather
Thunder
in Wisconsin.
Yeah, Cheese. I like that. Cheese Thunder.
Cheese Thunder with the weather.
That would have been perfect.
I thought there
would have been perfect.
So when it gets incredibly serious, have you ever been called back into the station when it gets really bad? Because I always think about this. Weather's really bad. You got to call back in, but it's like, hold on a second. You have to travel through that weather to get there.
Well, as a rule, if it's going to be bad, we're already there. So like in my case, if I knew the weather was going to be bad overnight, I would go in early and just stay at the station and wait until we had to go on the air. And then know I was going to stay late after the fact. So if the weather was going to get bad, I was almost always already there. And and Busby would have already been there too. I mean, we would have already been present at the station.
What are the rules? Because everybody wants us about weather, where you can jump in and interrupt the Chiefs game, where you can jump in and interrupt the Oscars, or jump in and interrupt Dallas or Grey's Anatomy or any of those other things.
Well, this has changed a little bit because when Channel 9, when Brian Busby and I were basically the two weather people at that station, we had our own discretion. We could say we need to break in here. And
this was back in the day,
right?
When you had some,
and we could say we need to break in and let people know this or that. And we didn't do it very often. We did it when it was really necessary to keep people safe.
Warning
a tornado warning or a severe thunderstorm warning that seemed to have straight line winds that were going to be a problem. So we tried to be judicious in how often we did it, but we would break in. Later, they would have people come in who were looking at how to do television, and they would tell the news director, you need to break in all the time. You need to break in a lot. You need to be on the air. So now all of a sudden, 20 years into it, you're on the air 24/7. So you're just going to be wall-to-wall weather if there's even the smallest threat. And so that is a change because they break in more often now than they used to, and they stay on longer now than they used to. In the early days, we had some discretion about how often we did and where we did. I do remember one Easter weekend, and ABC always used to carry the 10 Commandments. I mean, that was always on
of course.
on Easter. It was either the Saturday or so that was always on. It was a 4-hour thing on ABC. And there happened to be, I was working that night. I usually work the mornings, but I was working that night. And there was a tornado warning for Wyandotte County. And there was actually funnel clouds sighted out by the Speedway. So I cut in and I said, this is happening, da 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 da. We didn't stay on the air. We kept our map up. We kept all the warnings up. But I cut in and I said, this is happening. Please be aware, and so on, whatever I said. And then I cut in again, and I cut in quite a few times. And this was in the early days of email. But I got an email from a viewer. The first one was, please quit cutting in on 10 Commandments. This is our family tradition, and you're ruining our tradition.
Wow.
So I didn't.
In real time, they're emailing you at the station.
So I didn't have time to respond then, but I cut in again a few times. And the next one was, stop it. You're ruining our movie. And then the next one was filled with profanity. The guy broke at least 7 of the 10 Commandments just in his email to me. So and after the fact, I responded to him and I said, I'm very sorry I ruined your viewing, because I ended up staying on the air, and I probably took away Commandments 6 through 10.
Exactly.
And so, but I told him, I said, I'm very sorry, but imagine if this was in your neck of the woods, your neighborhood, you'd want us to be on to warn you. And so even though you'd
rather know it and not need it than need it and not know it.
So even though you don't live in Wyandotte County, you live in Eastern Jackson or somewhere, if it was in your neighborhood, you'd want us to be on the air. So I apologize, but it is our responsibility to do that. But it was our discretion at that point. It's changed. Now it's more of the news director and the weather person will have to kind of conjointly make that call.
Well, it's funny you should mention about weather, because now weather, as all information, has access to everybody. So is it worth bringing in when people are going to have their alerts on their smartphones, where there's a weather channel, where there's everything like that?
Well, that's the thing, is that it's all in our pockets now. We can pull out our gadget and we can find the information we want. There's still a certain comfort, maybe, to the idea that a familiar face or a familiar voice will tell you, this is what's happening, now you should go to your basement. So there might be a personal connection that you could still achieve over this that you wouldn't be able to achieve over that.
I had a friend, John Olvang, he's a comedian friend, and his parents loved Seinfeld. Who doesn't love Seinfeld, right? So they taped it. One time Seinfeld was coming on when there was a tornado warning, right? So when they play it back on the DVR, long after the tornado, it would come up. You've heard about these things, right?
Yeah.
It comes up again, back down in the basement, back down in the basement. I always wonder, why is there always tornadoes when Seinfeld's on? Maybe it's the Kramer effect.
It could be that, the Kavorka, the reverse Kavorka.
What did you think when the Weather Channel first got started? I always wondered about this. It's like the Teslas, this electric cars thing isn't going to work, or this Apple thing is going to work. So what did you think, 24-hour weather? What did you think about that?
Well, as a viewer, as a consumer, I could pretend like I thought it was going to be great, but I didn't think anybody would watch it. When I grew up in Wisconsin, my brothers and I didn't pay attention to the weather people. We paid attention to the night before. So if we were going to go skiing or swimming or something out at the lake in the morning, we just watched what the weather was in the sky the night before. And if it was a nice night, hey, we can go. So we didn't really pay attention to the weather people.
You don't have any AMS. That's just so
It was like, or we'd call our grandma, do your knees hurt? My knees hurt. Well, it's going to rain. But we didn't pay. So when they said there's a weather channel, it's going to be 24/7 weather, I thought, well, who's going to watch that? Well, it turns out everybody watches it. And what consultants will tell news channels, TV channels, is weather is the one story that affects everybody. So that's why when I did First News in the morning, we used to do weather. We do it at the top of the half hour, we do a middle version, and we do it at the very end. Now, by the time I quit doing weather on TV, we're doing it every 2 minutes.
Yeah. Did you ever expect the whole weather-related programming? I mean, world's worst storms, you know what I mean? The cold, 20 below. All these weather-related programming, episodic programs exist in that weather genre, because the Weather Channel doesn't play weather. It's like biggest storms, disasters.
And I think that, what it has taught us is that in this case, the consultants are kind of right. Weather is the one story that affects everybody, and people do get this interest in it. Now, some of us have lesser or more interest, but it seems to work.
There's a comedian, Kevin Coolidge, says, what did tornadoes do to piss off trailer homes, which is Has a tornado, how many tornadoes have actually hit Kansas City in your time here? How many times have you got on and it was really bad? Because most of the time it's just the theoretical premise, right? It's out in Gardner and I live in the city.
Well, I think 2003, in May of 2003, north of the river really got hit badly. Chris Ketz's house was destroyed.
Yeah, that's right. I remember that.
That's one that comes to mind. And
he was going to get steak knives and saved his life.
Yeah. And so there was that experience. There was the Joplin, which isn't in our immediate metro, but that same cluster of storms that weekend. there was a tornado in Lawrence, the Lawrence area. I can't remember the date exactly, but I just the other day had a woman come up to me and say, "I've got to tell you a story about my mother." And this woman herself was probably in her 50s, and her mother has passed away. But she said that during that Lawrence tornado, they lived out near there, and that they had called their mother and said, "You need to get to your basement because the storm's coming." And she said, "Well, I'll go to the basement when Joel tells me to."
Oh, wow.
Because she watched us all the time, watched Channel 9. And they said, "Well, okay." And I said, "Did it work out okay?" Because I would have hated to think. And they said, yes, you came on the air and said, "You should probably go to," and she went to the basement. But it became a running joke in their family that whenever she didn't want to do something, well, Joel would want you to do this. So it became this kind of sweet little running joke about that. So I think that when it comes to severe weather, having a familiar face or somebody you trust can make a difference. So I think in addition to tornadoes, my more devastating times here weather-wise had to do with flooding. Flooding was by far worse for me personally.
It always worse. But back to the tornado thing, wasn't there a time and place where I remember looking at the houses, especially out in the farmhouses, where there was actually a cellar out in the backyard?
Yeah.
Where they kept supplies and everything like that. I don't know how frequently it was there, but it was just a real life thing, a cellar.
Yeah,
right?
You'd come out and you'd open those doors and you'd go down and close the doors behind you.
And then when you buy
I spent a lot of my childhood in that cellar. It had nothing to do with a tornado.
Yeah, really?
My dad was a terrible, terrible man. And he would just put me down in the cellar.
You learned how to eat out of mason jars that way,
It was very sad.
And then
thanks for opening up that wound, Elliot.
That can of worms, which was actually your diet 3 days a week down there.
It was very sad.
So what I was going to ask you, and actually they build houses now with tornadoes, right? They say this is the safe
rooms, and they're like lined with concrete, and they're
now how does the weather? How do you predict the flood though? Because that's not really on radar, because there's a couple things at play, right? This is all atmospheric,
right?
So other than like that, the flood, I don't know if that's part of your job description, right? What happens on the ground, or how does that work?
Well, you do have to. You can watch, especially in the spring. You watch what's melting upstream. Mm-hmm. So if they had a lot of snow in South Dakota and North Dakota, you monitor that. National Weather Service monitors it, and then you kind of, as a storm approaches, you can figure out what's the rate, the rainfall rate. Is it going to overwhelm our system? And of course, in Kansas City, we've had many, many, many times where it overwhelmed our system. And so flooding, for me personally, I know tornadoes are devastating and horrible. I've seen maybe more devastation from floods than tornadoes in my time.
Now, those houses just coming down there.
Exactly.
And it's amazing where I would have to watch, and because everybody watches this weather. I don't know if you get old and they just start making you watch it. Maybe I'm over 50 and they were 60. All my channels are half weather channels.
I think it is required, actually.
Yeah. But
when you join ARP, they tell you you must now watch every weather story.
Just in case.
Look at that. It's snowing, Marge. Look.
Just our old lady in the brand. Or, I was in Alaska on a cruise, and tsunami signs. Something I never thought I'd see. I never thought I'd see. It's like, well, what is this for? It's like, well, if something happens in Japan, it's like, Japan.
And it can roll and roll and roll, and here it comes,
And you're supposed to just go uphill, right?
Yep, follow the animals. Because they'll go, and they'll go days early.
That's true.
They really will.
So if you see a bus patch with schnauzers.
Yeah, if you see a Winnebago filled with gazelle, follow that Winnebago.
How do the animals know before we do?
They've got better Wi-Fi. Well, I just think, innately, the nature, they feel it. They feel it. So that's what they've got.
That is interesting, because my dogs, the most simple thing is that, your dogs will start kind of freaking out long before the storm ever gets there.
Absolutely. They sense it. They sense it before we do. And my grandma used to always say, watch the birds. When the birds are really, really noisy and active and then just get quiet, there's something coming.
That's the movie thing, and again, with all this video, I watch these things of these people, right? And you see the video of like the tsunami where there's, and everybody's wondering, well, why is the water receding? And then they don't think, they don't think to just go.
Yeah,
right?
I think if we were I think the computers are great for weather people. I think computers are great. I think knowing how to read this stuff is great and important. But I think that there's also something to be said for watching the patterns and watching nature and trying to get a fix on that.
Right. One more weather question before I take a break. Storm chasing.
Yeah.
This actually came into effect as you were on the air, right?
Yes.
When somebody first came, he says, Joel, you know what I'm going to do?
Yeah.
There's a tornado. I'm going to get my El Camino. I'm going to go out and chase that.
Yeah.
What did you say?
I said, there's a home for people like you, and you should be in it. So go. I mean, I was never somebody to do that, but I mean, there were people who absolutely loved it, and if they learned how to do it safely, they were an invaluable resource.
How do they monetize that?
Well, that's a trick. A lot of them didn't care about the money; they just wanted to be out there and watch it. But some of them learned how to monetize it, and especially now with the internet, they can put their stuff up and sell ads, and people will, see them chasing a storm. But it's very dangerous. You should only learn. You should do it only after you've learned how to properly do it. And
is there a way to properly do it? Because I would see these videos. They're driving out in the middle of a corner, much like the movie Twister.
Yeah.
Right, with Paxton and Helen Hunt.
Right.
Where they're just kind of driving out there, And
well, I think one thing you do need to have a Helen Hunt as your hood ornament. Mm-hmm. If that's there, you can go anywhere you want.
Did you see the story about where Twister was playing at a drive-in and an actual Twister hit?
I did read that somewhere. But I think, the people who do this and are trained to do it are immensely helpful to people.
Have you done it as a ride-along?
I've never done it. No.
Why not? You're a weather. I mean, have you gotten in the helicopter and done all that stuff?
There are people, I've never gone in the helicopter, no.
Really?
No.
I mean, you work so simpatico with Johnny Rollins and these guys, I would think you'd be up there.
Let me say that when it comes to covering weather, I will say that, because I do have people ask me now, since I'm not on television anymore and I don't have an allegiance to any one station anymore. And first of all, they usually come to me and say, get off our lawn. How many times have we told you, get off the lawn? And then once I move off the lawn, they'll say, who do you watch for weather?
That's a good point.
And I'm not saying anything negative about anybody else, but on Channel 9, because Johnny knows his stuff weather-wise and flying, but weather-wise so well, it's like having a trained meteorologist up there. So he
identifies the clouds and everything that.
He's great. And so I think that he is great as far as severe weather and breaking news too. But when we're talking about weather, he's a guy that you want to have up there.
Okay. And hail damage. What's the biggest hail that you've ever identified in Kansas City?
Canned ham.
Was it canned ham?
No.
Baseball? Softball size?
Softball.
The softball size.
Softball, absolutely.
Is that like a term you can say?
Sure.
Like softball size?
You can say softball size hail.
You can't say like nectarine size hail or anything like that?
If you want to.
Grapefruit size?
Well, nectarine would actually, you're reaching a different demographic. Who are we going for here? Well, it's nectarine size.
It's a tropical thing. Right?
Yeah.
Well, we're going to take a break now. We're going to talk about the pop culture celebrity part of Joel Nichols' career when we get back on the last show on Televida.
Y para todos ustedes somos Daily Kitchen y estamos en City Market. Los invitamos a disfrutar de la rica comida que aquí se hace, acompañado de las ensaladas y sándwiches para ti y para toda tu familia. Queremos ser una extensión más de tu cocina. Abrimos todos los días, de lunes a domingo, para tu comodidad. Ven y visítanos. Recuerda que somos Daily Kitchen y estamos esperando. La mesa está servida con el mejor sazón de City Market en Kansas City.
Well, thank you, Joe. Will you come back and do some show about pop culture? Because I know we only talked about weather, but there's a whole other world of stuff I'd like to talk to you about. Will you come back?
I would be honored. Do I get more water?
You get more water and more barbecue sauce.
Okay, well then I'll show up.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
This has been the last show on Televida with Joel Nichols.